The security footage was crystal clear. Karen Williams, the neighborhood's self-appointed queen, slipping through the hole she'd cut in my fence at 2:47 a.m., her designer swimsuit gleaming under the motion sensor lights as she dove into my pool, like she owned it. For 3 months, she'd been treating my backyard like her personal resort while threatening to sue me over property lines. But tonight, as she stood dripping wet in my empty pool pit, screaming at the construction crew filling it with concrete, I realized she'd finally pushed the wrong person too far. The woman who'd made my life hell was about to learn that some people don't just get mad, they get even. Marcus Chen had always believed in being a good neighbor. When he'd moved into the quiet suburban street in Millbrook Heights 18 months ago, he'd introduced himself to everyone with homemade cookies and genuine smiles. He'd helped elderly Mr. Peterson with his groceries, loaned his ladder to the Johnsons for their gutter cleaning, and even volunteered to organize the annual block party. But Karen Williams was different. From the moment she'd strutted over in her perfectly pressed athleisure wear and designer sunglasses, Marcus knew she was trouble. "You do realize," she'd said, not bothering with pleasantries, "that your pool installation is going to affect my property values. I'll be watching to make sure everything is up to code." That had been 6 months ago, and Karen had made good on her promise to watch. She watched everything Marcus did with the intensity of a hawk circling prey. When he'd planted the Japanese maple near the property line, she'd called the city 3 times, claiming it violated setback requirements. When he'd installed the outdoor kitchen, she'd complained about potential fire hazards. And when the pool was finally completed, a beautiful infinity-edge design that had cost him 2 years of savings, she'd immediately demanded to see the permits. Marcus had shown her everything. Naturally, the permits were in order. The pool was entirely on his property, and every aspect of the construction had been approved by the city. But Karen wasn't satisfied with being wrong. She doubled down. "That pool is too close to the property line," she'd declared, standing in his backyard uninvited, pointing at the pristine blue water that sparkled in the afternoon sun. "I'm getting a surveyor." The surveyor had confirmed what Marcus already knew. The pool was a full 15 feet from the property line, well within legal requirements. But Karen's harassment had only intensified. She'd filed noise complaints about the pool filter, claimed the underwater lights were too bright, and somehow convinced her husband Greg to write a letter to the Homeowners Association about neighborhood aesthetics. What Marcus didn't know, what he wouldn't discover until much later, was that Karen had been doing more than just complaining about his pool. She'd been using it. The first time it happened, Marcus was out of town on business. He'd returned to find his pool skimmer full of someone else's hair-long, bleached blonde strands that definitely weren't his. The pool chemicals were off too, as if someone had been swimming and hadn't bothered to shower first. He'd chalked it up to a maintenance issue, maybe something blown in by the wind. The second time, he'd found a designer hair clip at the bottom of the deep end. It was expensive, the kind of thing Karen always wore, but Marcus told himself he was being paranoid. There had to be a logical explanation. The third time, he'd noticed wet footprints leading from his pool deck to the fence line, and that's when he'd started to suspect the truth. But suspecting and proving were 2 different things. That's when Marcus had made the decision that would change everything. He'd installed security cameras. "You sure you need this many?" asked Danny, the security system installer, as he positioned the 8th camera. "This is more surveillance than most businesses have." "I just want to be thorough," Marcus had replied, not mentioning his growing suspicions about his neighbor. "You never know what might happen when you're not home." The cameras were top of the line, with night vision, motion sensors, and cloud storage. They covered every angle of his backyard, the pool area, and most importantly, the fence line. If someone was trespassing on his property, he'd have proof. Marcus didn't have to wait long. The first footage came in on a Tuesday night at 2:15 a.m. His phone buzzed with a motion alert, and when he opened the app, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. There was Karen Williams, dressed in a black swimsuit, carefully pushing through a section of his fence that she'd obviously cut and disguised with loose boards. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this many times before, tiptoeing across his deck and slipping into the pool without even turning on the lights for 40 minutes. She swam laps in his pool, using his towels, even helping herself. To a buyer from the outdoor refrigerator he kept stocked for pool parties. When she was done, she carefully replaced the fence boards and disappeared back into her own yard. Marcus sat in his bedroom, staring at the footage in disbelief. The woman who'd been harassing him for months about his pool, who'd called the city, threatened lawsuits, and made his life miserable, had been secretly using his pool like her own private club. The next morning, Marcus waited for Karen to leave for her daily yoga class before walking over to inspect the fence. Sure enough, she'd cut a section of boards in a way that made them easy to remove and replace. The cut was clean and deliberate, positioned perfectly to be invisible from the street, but provide easy access to his backyard. She'd even oiled the hinges to keep them from squeaking. This wasn't a one-time incident. This was premeditated, ongoing trespassing. Marcus could have confronted her immediately, but something held him back. Maybe it was the lawyer in him. He'd worked in corporate law before switching to freelance consulting. Or maybe it was just curiosity about how far Karen would go. Either way, he decided to wait and gather more evidence. The evidence came quickly. Over the next 2 weeks, Karen visited his pool 6 more times. Sometimes she came alone, sometimes with her sister Linda, who lived across town. Once, she'd even brought her book club for middle-aged women who'd sat on his pool deck, drinking his wine and discussing the latest bestseller while floating. On his pool floats, the most brazen incident happened on a Thursday afternoon when Marcus was supposed to be at work. He'd called in sick, but hadn't posted about it on social media, so Karen had no way of knowing he was home. He'd been in his home office working on a client project when he heard voices from the backyard through his window. He'd watched Karen and Linda setting up what looked like a full spa day. They'd brought their own massage table, essential oils, and what appeared to be a professional-grade sound system. Linda was giving Karen a massage right there on his pool deck, while some kind of meditation. Music played through speakers they'd plugged into his outdoor electrical outlets. "This is perfect," Karen had said, her voice carrying clearly through the open window. "It's so much better than the community pool. No crowds, no screaming kids, and best of all, it's free." "Are you sure Marcus won't find out?" Linda had asked, working some kind of oil into Karen's shoulders. "Please," Karen had laughed. "That man is so clueless, he probably doesn't even know how to check his own security system. Besides, what's he going to do? Call the police? I'll just say I was invited." "But what about all those complaints you filed? What about them?" "That's business. This is pleasure. The pool shouldn't be there anyway. It's too close to my property line. I'm basically doing him a favor by using it before the city makes him tear it out." Marcus had recorded the entire conversation on his phone, adding it to his growing collection of evidence. But he still didn't act. Something told him to wait, to see how far Karen would push this situation. The answer came 2 weeks later when Marcus received a certified letter from Karen's attorney. The letter was a masterpiece of legal aggression, wrapped in official language. Karen was formally demanding that Marcus remove his pool, claiming it violated multiple city ordinances and was causing irreparable harm to her property values and peaceful enjoyment of her home. She was prepared to file a lawsuit if Marcus didn't comply within 30 days. The letter also included a demand for $50,000 in damages for the aesthetic pollution and emotional distress his pool had caused her. Marcus read the letter 3 times, each reading making him angrier than the last. The woman who'd been trespassing on his property for months, using his pool like her personal spa, was now demanding he pay her for the privilege of being victimized. But the final straw came. The next morning, when Marcus found Karen floating in his pool at 7 a.m., talking loudly on her phone about her legal strategy. "Trust me, Janet," she was saying, apparently oblivious to the fact that Marcus might be able to hear her from his bedroom window, "this is going to be easy money. The pool is definitely too close to the property line. Measured it myself, and I've been documenting all the ways it's affected my quality of life. Late-night parties, bright lights, loud music. By the time I'm done, he'll be begging to settle." Marcus had heard enough lies for one lifetime. He opened his bedroom window and called down to her. "Morning, Karen. How's the water today?" Karen nearly fell off her pool float in surprise. She flailed in the water for a moment before finding her footing in the shallow end, her phone now floating uselessly beside her. "Marcus, I was just... Just what? Just..." Marcus thought the inspection debacle would be enough to send Karen into hiding. He was wrong. If anything, being publicly humiliated in front of city officials had transformed her from a neighborhood nuisance into something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and a grudge to settle. The first sign of trouble came at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday night. Marcus woke to the sound of his pool equipment grinding in worry in ways it had never done before. He stumbled outside to find his pool filter clogged with what looked like an entire bag of mulch, the water cloudy and brown. Someone had dumped organic matter into his pristine pool, and the filtration system was choking on it. It took him 4 hours and $300 in emergency pool service to get the system running again. The technician, a grizzled man named Pete, who'd seen everything in 30 years of pool maintenance, shook his head as he worked. "This wasn't an accident," Pete said, pulling handfuls of bark chips and potting soil from the filter. "Someone did this on purpose." "You got enemies." Marcus didn't answer, but he didn't need to. He already knew who was responsible. The security cameras confirmed it. At 2:47 a.m., a figure in dark clothing had climbed over his back fence knot. Karen's secret entrance, which Marcus had sealed with new board sand, dumped several bags of garden mulch directly into the pool. The figure was too bundled up to identify clearly, but Marcus recognized the walking style, the height, the deliberate movements. Karen had escalated from trespassing to vandalism. But when Marcus called the police officer, Rodriguez looked at the footage and shook his head. "The person is completely covered hood, mask, gloves, unless you can prove it was your neighbor. This is just generic vandalism. We can file a report, but without a clear identification. It's obviously her," Marcus said. "Who else would do this? Could be kids, could be random vandalism, could be anyone with a grudge. Do you have any proof it was Mrs. Williams specifically?" Marcus realized he didn't. Karen had been smart this time, covering herself completely. But he knew it was her, and more importantly, she knew he knew. The message was clear. If Marcus wanted to play games, Karen could play them better. The next attack came 2 days later. Marcus woke up to find his lawn sprinkler system running full blast and not unusual, except it was running brown water. Someone had tapped into the irrigation line and connected it to what smelled like septic runoff. His entire front yard was flooded with sewage water, and the smell was so bad that neighbors 3 houses down were complaining. The emergency plumber, a woman named Sarah, who arrived within an hour of Marcus's panicked call, traced the problem to an illegal connection behind the row of hedges that separated Marcus's property from Karen's. "This is sophisticated work," Sarah said, showing Marcus the jury-rigged connection. "Whoever did this knows plumbing. They tapped into your irrigation line and connected it to a sewage outflow pipe. This isn't random vandalism, this is revenge. Can you prove who did it? The connection point is on the property line. Could have been accessed from either side. But I'll tell you what, this kind of work requires tools and knowledge, not something a kid would do." Marcus looked toward Karen's house, where he could see her watching from her kitchen window. When she noticed him looking, she waved cheerfully and held up a coffee mug in a mock toast. The cleanup cost Marcus $800 and required him to reseed his entire front lawn. But the real damage wasn't financial, it was social. Half the neighborhood now associated his house with the smell of sewage, and the incident had become the talk of the local social media groups. "Did you hear about the sewage flood on Maple Street?" Read one Facebook post, "So gross. I heard it was some kind of plumbing nightmare." "Poor neighbors," read another. "Can you imagine the smell? I bet their property values are shot." Marcus realized that Karen wasn't just attacking his property, she was attacking his reputation. Every incident made him look like either a victim or someone who couldn't maintain his own home. Either way, it was exactly the kind of chaos that would drive down property values and make the neighborhood question whether Marcus belonged there. But Karen's most devastating attack was still coming. Marcus was in his home office, working on a client presentation, when his doorbell rang. He opened the door to find a woman in her 60s holding a clipboard and wearing a shirt that read, "Child Protective Services, Mr. Chen. I'm Linda Morrison from CPS. We've received reports of unsafe conditions on your property." Marcus's blood went cold. Unsafe conditions. "I don't have children. The reports indicate that neighborhood children have access to an unprotected pool area that violates state safety regulations. My pool has all required safety features. It was inspected and approved by the city. May I see for myself?" Marcus led Linda through his house to the backyard, his mind racing. His pool had a regulation fence, self-closing gates, pool alarms, and safety covers. Every aspect had been designed to exceed safety requirements, specifically to avoid problems like this. Linda spent 20 minutes examining the pool area, testing the gate latches, checking the fence height, and reviewing the safety equipment. Finally, she made notes on her clipboard and turned to Marcus. "Mr. Chen, your pool safety measures exceed state requirements. I'm not sure why this report was filed. Who filed the report?" Linda consulted her paperwork. The complaint came from a Mrs. Williams. She claimed that children were regularly accessing your pool without supervision, and that you had failed to install required safety barriers. "Mrs. Williams is my neighbor. She's been harassing me for months. Do you have documentation of this harassment?" Marcus thought about the security footage, the false city complaints, the vandalism. "Yes, extensive documentation. I'd recommend you file a police report about the false CPS complaint. Filing knowingly false reports to Child Protective Services is a felony in this state." After Linda left, Marcus sat in his backyard, staring at his pool and feeling something shift inside him. Karen had crossed every line: trespassing, vandalism, fraud, and now filing false reports about child safety. She wasn't just trying to annoy him anymore, she was trying to destroy his life. But her biggest mistake was involving CPS, unlike the other agencies she'd contacted. Child Protective Services kept detailed records of false reports and actively prosecuted people who wasted their resources. Karen had just created a paper trail that could land her in prison. Marcus was done playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive. He started by organizing all his evidence: the security footage of Karen trespassing and using his pool, the recordings of her conversations about her legal strategy, the documentation of the vandalism, the false city complaints, and now the false CPS report. Marcus had built a case that would destroy Karen Williams legally, financially, and socially. But as he reviewed the evidence, a different idea began to form in his mind. An idea that would give Karen exactly what she deserved while solving his problem permanently. The next morning, Marcus called his pool contractor. "Danny, it's Marcus. Chen, I need you to come out and give me a quote on pool removal." "Pool removal? But you just finished that pool 6 months ago." "It's beautiful work, I know, but I'm thinking of going in a different direction." "How quickly could you have it removed?" "Well, if you're serious, we could start next week. It's a shame, though, that Infinity Edge design was some of our best work." "I'm sure it was. But sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the greater good." That afternoon, Marcus walked over to Karen's house and rang the doorbell. When she answered, her face immediately shifted into defensive mode. "If you're here to threaten me, actually, I'm here to thank you." Karen's expression shifted to confusion. "Thank me. You were right about the pool. It is too close to the property line, and it is affecting property values. I've decided to have it removed." For a moment, Karen looked like she'd won the lottery. Then suspicion crept into her eyes. "You're lying." "Why would I lie? You'll be able to see the removal trucks next week." "What's the catch?" "No catch. You convinced me that the pool was a mistake, so I'm fixing the mistake." Karen stared at him, clearly trying to figure out the angle. "Just like that? You're removing a $50,000 pool because I complained. $50,000 was the installation cost. Removal and landscaping will probably run another $30,000. But you're right, it's worth it for neighborhood harmony." "I don't believe you." "You don't have to believe me. You'll see the work starting Monday." Marcus turned to leave, then paused as if remembering something. "Oh, and Karen, you might want to stay away from my backyard for the next few weeks. Construction sites can be dangerous." As Marcus walked back to his house, he could feel Karen watching him from her doorway. He could practically hear the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out what he was really up to. She'd find out soon enough. Monday morning arrived with the rumble of heavy machinery. Marcus had hired not just any pool removal company, but the most thorough and expensive service in the state. Trucks began arriving at 7 a.m. Dump trucks, concrete pumps, and a crew of workers who looked like they could level a city block. The noise was tremendous. The excavator alone sounded like a mechanical dinosaur, and the concrete saw that began cutting through the pool deck created a shriek, "Teep!" Marcus woke up to 847 missed calls, his phone buzzing with notifications every few seconds. The YouTube video had exploded across social media, racked up over 2 million views and spawned dozens of reaction videos. Hashtag Pool Revenge was trending on Twitter, and someone had already created a TikTok account called @KarenV's, the pool, that was posting daily updates about the situation. But the real impact was happening in his own neighborhood. Marcus stepped outside to get his morning coffee and found his front yard filled with news vans. Reporters were setting up cameras, producers were directing crews, and neighbors were gathering on the sidewalk like they were watching a celebrity arrest. Mr. Chen called a reporter from Channel 7. "Can you comment on the viral video about your neighbor dispute?" Before Marcus could answer, another reporter thrust a microphone in his face. "Is it true that Mrs. Williams has been arrested?" Arrested? Marcus hadn't heard about any arrest. She was taken into custody this morning on charges of criminal trespass, vandalism, and filing false reports. The district attorney says your video evidence was instrumental in building the case. Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with something that might have been sympathy. He'd wanted Kieran to face consequences, but seeing her actually led away in handcuffs was surreal. "Mr. Chen, what's your response to people calling you a hero for standing up to entitled neighbors?" "I'm not a hero," Marcus said carefully. "I'm just someone who documented what was happening to protect myself and my property. Will you be pressing civil charges as well?" Marcus looked toward Karen's house, where he could see Greg Williams, peeking through the curtains with the shell-shocked expression of a man whose world had just imploded. "Right now, I just want to rebuild my pool and get back to normal." But normal was the last thing Marcus was going to get. The story had captured something deeper than just a neighbor dispute. In an age of entitled behavior and social media justice, Marcus had become a symbol of the ordinary person fighting back against bullies. The video resonated with everyone who'd ever dealt with a difficult neighbor, an abusive boss, or anyone who thought rules didn't apply to them. Comments poured in from around the world. "This is exactly what every Karen deserves. The patience this man showed is incredible. I would have snapped after the first week. The way he let her think she was winning while building the case against her is genius. Finally, someone who knows how to handle a bully the right way." But with viral fame came unexpected complications. Marcus's consulting business was suddenly flooded with inquiries from people who wanted to hire the guy who took down Karen. His LinkedIn profile had gone from 200 connections to over 50,000 in 2 days. Publishing agents were calling about book deals, and 3 different production companies wanted to option his story for a movie. More importantly, lawyers were calling to not just Karen's lawyers, though there were plenty of those, but attorneys representing other people who'd been harassed, stalked, or bullied and wanted Marcus's help documenting their cases. "Mr. Chen," said Jennifer Walsh, a civil rights attorney from downtown, "what you've done here could change how we handle harassment cases. Your methodical documentation, the way you let the perpetrator escalate while building evidence, a masterclass in legal strategy." "I'm not a lawyer," Marcus reminded her. "No, but you understand something that most people don't. The best revenge is letting bullies destroy themselves while you document everything." Meanwhile, Karen's life was falling apart in spectacular fashion. The school district had placed her on administrative leave pending an investigation. Her homeowners association was threatening to revoke her membership due to the negative publicity. And worst of all, the viral video had attracted the attention of other people Karen had bullied over the years. Former neighbors, co-workers, and even some of her own family members began sharing their own stories about Karen's behavior. A Facebook group called Karen Williams Victims Support had formed, with over 3,000 members sharing their experiences. "She did the exact same thing to us," posted one former neighbor, "called the city about every little thing, filed false complaints, made our lives hell until we moved." "I worked with her for 3 years," wrote a former teacher. "She was a nightmare, bullied other staff, harassed parents, treated students like garbage. I'm so glad someone finally stood up to her. She's my sister," posted someone claiming to be Linda Karen's spa partner. "I love her, but she's been like this our whole lives. Maybe this will finally be the wake-up call she needs." The most damaging post came from Greg Williams himself. "I'm Karen's husband," he wrote in a long Facebook post that was screenshot and shared thousands of times. "I want to apologize to Mr. Chen and everyone else who's been hurt by my wife's behavior. I've been enabling her for years, making excuses, cleaning up her messes. I thought if I just kept quiet, she'd eventually stop. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." The post went on to detail years of Karen's escalating behavior, harassment of neighbors, abuse of service workers, public tantrums when she didn't get her way. Greg painted a picture of a woman who'd never faced real consequences for her actions and had become increasingly entitled and aggressive over time. The man with the pool didn't deserve any of this, Greg concluded. He was just trying to live his life in peace. Karen brought all of this on herself, and I can't pretend otherwise anymore. By the end of the week, Greg had filed for divorce and moved out of the house. But Karen wasn't going down without a fight. On Friday afternoon, Marcus was in his backyard supervising the prep work for his new pool installation when he heard shouting from the front of his house. He walked around to find Karen standing in his driveway, apparently having been released on bail. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was unwashed and stringy. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans, and her face had the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept in days. "You destroyed my life," she screamed at him loud. Enough for the neighbors to hear. "I lost my job. My husband left me. Everyone thinks I'm a monster. Karen, you need to leave my property. You ruined everything. All I wanted was for you to move that stupid pool, and all I wanted was to be left alone." A small crowd was gathering: neighbors, reporters who'd been camped out all week, and random people who'd driven by hoping to catch a glimpse of the viral sensation. "I'm going to sue you for everything you have," Karen continued. "Defamation, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress. With what money? I heard you can't even afford bail without Greg's help." Karen's face contorted. "With rage, I'll represent myself. I'll take you to court and prove that you're the real villain here. Good luck with that. I'm sure a jury will be very sympathetic to someone who's been convicted of criminal trespass and vandalism. Those charges are bogus. I was invited. By who? By? Karen seemed to realize she'd walked into the same trap that had started this whole mess. "You know what? Forget the courts. I don't need a judge to get justice." Something in her tone made Marcus step back. "Karen, whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. Why not? You already took everything from me. What else do I have to lose?" Marcus could see the dangerous desperation in her eyes. Karen had reached the point where consequences no longer mattered because she felt like she had nothing left to lose. That made her unpredictable and potentially dangerous. "You have your freedom," Marcus said carefully. "Don't throw that away, too. Freedom. You call this freedom. I can't leave my house without people recognizing me and calling me names. I can't get a job because everyone's seen that video. My own family won't talk to me. This isn't freedom. This is a prison." "That's not my fault, Karen. That's the result of your own choices." "My choices?" Karen laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My choice to want a peaceful neighborhood. My choice to expect people to follow the rules. Your choice to trespass. Your choice to vandalize my property. Your choice to file false reports. Your choice to escalate instead of walking away. I never should have walked away. I should have fought harder." The crowd was growing larger, and Marcus could see people holding up phones to record the confrontation. This was exactly what Karen didn't need: more viral content that would follow her forever. "Karen, please, you're only making this worse for yourself." "Worse? How could it possibly get worse?" As if in answer to her question, a police car pulled up to the curb. Officer Rodriguez got out, looking tired and annoyed. "Mrs. Williams, you're in violation of the restraining order." "What restraining order?" "The one Mr. Chen filed yesterday. You're not supposed to be within 500 feet of his property." Karen stared at Marcus in disbelief. "You got a restraining order? After the threats and escalating behavior? My lawyer recommended it." "What threats? I never threatened you." Officer Rodriguez consulted his notes. "Ma'am, you posted on social media that you were going to make him pay for what he did, and that you were planning something special for Mr. Chen, given your history of criminal behavior toward him." The judge considered those credible threats. Karen's face went white. She'd been so focused on her public statements of defiance that she hadn't realized they could be used as evidence against her. "Those weren't threats. I was just ... I was angry. Ma'am, I need you." 6 months later, Marcus stood on his back deck, watching the sunrise reflect off the surface of his new pool. The infinity edge created a perfect mirror effect, making it seem like the water extended all the way to the horizon. The waterfall feature added a gentle background soundtrack, and the underwater lighting system could create displays that neighbors could see from 3 blocks away. It was, by any measure, the most spectacular pool in the county. But the real transformation wasn't in his backyard, it was in his life. The viral video had launched Marcus into a new career as a consultant, specializing in documentation and evidence gathering for harassment cases. His book, The Patient Neighbor: How to Handle Bullies Without Becoming One, had spent 12 weeks on the bestseller list. The movie rights had sold to Netflix for 7 figures. More importantly, he'd helped dozens of other people document and prosecute their own harassers, using the same methodical approach that had brought down Karen Williams. This morning was special, though. Today marked the 1-year anniversary of Karen's first trespass into his pool, and Marcus was throwing a celebration party. Not a party to celebrate Karen's downfall that felt petty, but a party to celebrate resilience, justice, and the power of community. The guest list included everyone who'd supported him through the ordeal: his neighbors, the police officers who'd helped build the case, the reporters who'd covered the story fairly, and even some of the people who'd reached out after seeing the video to share their own stories of standing up to bullies. Marcus was arranging pool floats when his doorbell rang. He opened the front door to find Jennifer Walsh, the civil rights attorney who'd become both a friend and a business partner. "The guest of honor has arrived," she said, grinning and holding up a bottle of champagne. "Guest of honor? Marcus, you've changed how people think about documentation and legal self-defense. The Chen method is being taught in law schools. Now, you're definitely the guest of honor at your own party." As guests began arriving, Marcus marveled at how much his life had changed. The neighborhood that had once been divided by Karen's drama was now closer than ever. Even people who'd initially been neutral had come to appreciate how Marcus had handled the situation with patience, evidence, and legal channels rather than escalation and revenge. The party was in full swing, with kids playing in the pool, while adults relaxed on the deck when Officer Rodriguez approached Marcus with a serious expression. "Sorry to interrupt the party, but I thought you should know Karen Williams was released from county jail this morning." Marcus felt a brief chill, then reminded himself that Karen was bound by multiple restraining orders and facing several pending criminal trials. How long was she in? 6 months total. Violated the restraining order twice more after that incident at your house. Her lawyer finally convinced her that staying away from you was the only way to avoid more jail time. Think she learned her lesson? Rodriguez laughed, but there was no humor in it. People like Karen Williams don't learn lessons, Marcus. They just find new targets. As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification. From his neighborhood watch app, someone had posted a video with the caption, "Guess who's back?" The video showed Karen Williams standing in her front yard, looking dramatically different from the put-together woman who'd first confronted Marcus about his pool. Her hair was shorter and grayer, her designer clothes had been replaced with discount store basics, and she looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past 12 months. But what struck Marcus most was her expression. There was no anger, no defiance, no entitled rage. She just looked ... defeated. "Poor woman," said Jennifer, looking over Marcus's shoulder at the video. "I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. She made her choices. Marcus, every step of the way she could have chosen differently." Marcus watched Karen disappear into her house, the same house she'd once shared with Greg, who'd moved across the country after their divorce was finalized, the same house where she'd planned her harassment campaign and celebrated what she'd thought was her victory when his first pool was demolished. Now it was just her, alone with the consequences of her actions. Marcus called out Pete, the pool maintenance guy who'd become an unexpected friend. "You've got to see this." Marcus walked over to find Pete showing a group of guests something on his tablet. It was a news article from the local paper. "Former viral villain seeks fresh start." The article featured an interview with Karen Williams, conducted from her living room. She looked tired and defeated, a stark contrast to the aggressive woman who'd terrorized Marcus for months. "I know people think I'm a monster," Karen was quoted as saying, "and maybe I was. I let my anger and my need to control everything destroy my life. I lost my husband, my job, my friends, my reputation. I'm not asking for sympathy, but I want people to know that I understand now how wrong I was. The article went on to detail Karen's court-ordered anger management classes, her community service requirements, and her attempts to find employment despite her viral infamy. I can't undo what I did to Mr. Chen, the article continued. I can't take back the months of harassment or the damage I caused. All I can do is try to be a better person and hope that someday people will remember me for something other than the worst year of my life. Marcus found himself reading the article twice, trying to process this very different version of the woman who'd made his life hell. Think it's genuine? Asked Jennifer. Does it matter? Marcus replied. Real or not, she's facing the consequences of her actions. That's what matters. You don't feel vindicated reading this. Marcus considered the question while watching his neighbors enjoy his pool. Kids laughing as they played Marco Polo while adults shared stories and celebrated community. A year ago, this gathering would have been impossible because of Karen's constant drama and complaints. I feel ... Marcus paused, searching for the right word. Complete, like a chapter is finally closed. What's the next chapter? Before Marcus could answer, a cheer went up from the pool area. Someone had connected their phone to the outdoor speakers and was playing a song that had become an unofficial anthem among Marcus's supporters, Sweet Caroline, with the lyrics changed to Sweet Karma. Marcus laughed despite himself. The situation had taken on a life of its own, becoming bigger than just a neighbor dispute. It had become a symbol of standing up to bullies, of using patience and documentation instead of escalation, of how ordinary people could fight back against entitled behavior. But as the sun set and the party wound down, Marcus found himself alone on his deck, looking out at the pool that had started everything. Tomorrow, he'd wake up and continue building his new business, helping other harassment victims. He'd work on his second book, take meetings with production companies about the movie adaptation, and maybe do another interview about the importance of documenting everything when dealing with difficult people. Karen Williams would wake up in her empty house, serving the remainder of her community service sentence and trying to rebuild a life that her own actions had destroyed. The difference between their futures was simple. Marcus had chosen patience, evidence, and legal channels. When faced with a bully, Karen had chosen escalation, lies, and criminal behavior when faced with something she couldn't control. The pool had just been the catalyst. The real story was about choices and consequences, about how people reveal their true character when they think they have power over someone else. Marcus's phone buzzed with one final notification of the evening. It was a message from someone named David Chunno, relation, despite the shared surname, who lived in Portland. Mr. Chen, I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story. My neighbor has been harassing my family for 2 years, and reading about your experience gave me the courage to start documenting everything instead of just suffering in silence. I installed cameras last week and already caught him vandalizing my car. The police are building a case now, and my lawyer says we have everything we need. You probably saved my family years of misery. Marcus smiled and typed back, document everything. Stay patient, let them destroy themselves. And remember, the best revenge is living well. He sent the message and turned off his phone, then walked to the edge of his pool. The underwater lights created a magical blue glow that reflected off the water feature and made the whole backyard look like something from a resort. Karen had been right about one thing. This pool was spectacular. It was too bad she'd never get to enjoy it the legal way as an invited guest who'd earned the privilege. Through friendship and mutual respect, instead she'd chosen to be a cautionary tale, a viral villain, a reminder that entitled behavior and bullying tactics eventually catch up with everyone. Marcus dove into his pool, the warm water enveloping him as he swam to the deep end. Above him, the stars were coming out, and the gentle sound of the waterfall created perfect background music for reflection. A year ago, he'd been a quiet consultant who just wanted to enjoy his backyard pool in peace. Now he was an accidental activist, a best-selling author, and a symbol of how ordinary people could stand up to extraordinary bullies. Had tried to make his life miserable and failed spectacularly. In trying to tear him down, she'd only lifted him higher. In trying to control